Right. Today we're going to look at this little application, I suppose you could call it, mini application that I've created to do quizzes. And this example has been posted. So let me show you how it behaves first, and then we'll sort of reverse engineer this. We'll try to figure out what it does just by observing its behavior. And we'll talk about sort of the best way to do it. I hesitate to say best way. We'll look at like why I made some decisions to maybe improve the maintainability of this, is probably a better way to put it, because I wouldn't say this is optimal, but I did do some things that make this quiz pretty good. So not much attention was spent to the appearance of it, so bear with me on that. It's a quiz of just addition problems where you can type in the correct answers or the incorrect answers. You hit grade, and it shows you the percentage that you've gotten. All right. So we know there's going to be the form. And it's going to call the process. And it's going to do it in an AJAX way. How do we know it does it in an AJAX way? Because we don't get a page refresh when we do this. Notice when we go and click it, we don't see the status changing. We don't see a little flicker on the tab or anything. It changes it in place. So we know this is being done via an AJAX call. All right. Which, if you think about it, is appropriate for this. You might ask, why don't we do this via JavaScript? We don't do this via JavaScript because if we were going to include the correct answers in the JavaScript, then someone could look at the source and cheat on the quiz. Now, what person who is studying addition would be smart enough to go and view the source and decode the JavaScript is another question. We will not deal with that question today. But it makes sense to grade the quiz on the server side is I guess what I'm saying. All right. And by making it an AJAX request, we're allowing this to refresh the page or change the content of the page without refreshing the whole page. And we also allow it to stay on the form. So we're still on the form. If the user gets a question wrong and they want to try again, their old answers are there. So it's not like they have to retype the old answers, but they can try it again and get the new results. So this makes sense for an AJAX application because A, we need the server to do it. B, there's a lot of nice things that happen when we don't refresh this page completely. All right, so what do we pass from form? What do we have to pass from the form to the process script? What data do we need to pass? Yeah. We need to pass the answers to the questions. So the query, and I'm just making up names for these PHP files. I forget the actual name. We'll see those in a minute. But the request that we're going to make to the server is going to look something like this. Answer 0 or answer 1, I forget what I called it, equals 12. Answer 2 equals 13. And so on. So that's what the request that the client makes to the server is going to look like. All right, we're going to call the script, and we need to pass it the answers. Now, here's a trick question. All right, what are we getting back from the server? No one wants to answer now because I said it's a trick question. Yes. You might think that. we're not getting back the percentage. We're actually getting back whether they got each question right or wrong. All right. And why am I doing that? I'm doing that because that gives me more flexibility on how I can present it. All right. I could either, if I send back the correct answer, or if I send back whether the questions are right or wrong in data that looks like this would mean they got the first question right, the second question wrong, the third question right, the fourth question right. If I send the data back like this, I can calculate the percentage. All right. But I have the flexibility if I want to put an X next to the questions they got wrong and a check next to the questions they got right, I can do that. All right. So it's a lot more flexible if we can do that. And as far as calculating the percentage, there's no deep secret to that. That's something that doesn't have to happen on the server side. We're just taking a number divided by another number, and JavaScript is perfectly capable of doing that. So you might say, like, well, why aren't we doing that on the server side for grading it? Well, we're producing the right or wrong question, the right or wrong response, depending on whether the question's right or wrong. We're sending that to the server, and JavaScript is able to tally that. Now, so that's sort of the basic design of this. Couple more things though. This is a 4-question quiz. All right. And each question probably looks something like this. Again, I'm doing this from memory, so I don't remember precisely what it looks like, but the meaning of this will be the same. And so on. The rest of the attributes for this. So we have this repeated for as many times as there are questions on the quiz. Which, if we had 4 questions on the quiz, hey, that's not that big of a deal. We copy and paste this code 4 times and just change the number. Not that big a deal. What if we wanted to change this, though, to have 10 questions? Well, then there's a little more copying and pasting. And what does the server-side script look like? It's going to look something like this. It's going to look something like this. We're going to have an if statement that's going to look at the value of the thing from the form and do something if it's true, do something else if it's false. Okay. We could do this and we could copy and paste and duplicate this code a bunch of different times. But as we said, I think I said in this class, one of the rules of programming is DRY. Do not repeat yourself. So when you have a chunk of code that's repeated over and over and over again, all right, look at it as an opportunity to do something better. And in this case, we're going to do something on the client side and something on the server side that's going to make this work better. All right. We're going to have an array of questions effectively. Actually, we're going to have a couple arrays. We're going to have an array for number 1, an array for number 2. Those are called parallel arrays. They're called parallel because they match up. In other words, array 1 sub 0 matches with array 2 sub 0 all the way down the line. So there needs to be as many elements in array 1 as there is in array 2. All right. If we do that, then we don't have to hard code the answer. We can calculate the answer. The answer to problem 1 is simply array 1 sub 0 plus array 2 sub 0. And we have the answer. So we don't have to hard code. Also, we can loop through those arrays. We don't have to have 7 if statements if there's 7 questions. And if you expand this, what if there were 100 questions? Well, that would be a lot of copying and pasting, and you're bound to get something wrong and forget to change a number or whatever. All right. So we're going to have 2 arrays that have the questions in them, has the first number, the second number. We're going to assume that these are all addition operations. All right. We could easily expand this to include other kinds of operations if we wanted to, but we didn't in this example. So we have 2 arrays that we're going to use to loop through to look at the user's answers, compare it to the answer we calculate, and determine if it's right or wrong. We're also going to use those 2 arrays to form the questions on the client side. In other words, what's the difference between this line and the one that comes below us? This number changes from answer 1 to answer 2. And if we had 100 of them, answer 3, answer 4, answer 5, all the way through answer 100. So we have duplicated code, repeated code. We can take advantage of that as an opportunity to make it more maintainable by creating an array. So let me show you what I mean in practice. Let's look at the code for this. I have an include file that's called questions include. And what it has is it has 2 arrays. That's it. And these 2 arrays correspond to the first number, the first question, second question, third question, and fourth question. Because if we look, the first question is 1 plus 5. 1 plus 5. Second question is 8 plus 4. 8 plus 4. And so on. So if we want to make 100 questions on here, I'm not going to do 100, but we'll go add a few of them. Make sure I have the same number in both, and I do. And then the next time I load this page up, I get all these questions. All right. So we took the opportunity when we identified some repeated code, we took the opportunity to change it, to do it a different way, and that change will make it more flexible. Likewise, and I'm just going to sort of answer these. I'll answer a few right just so that we few wrong. 54 repeating, all right, is our percentage. But it graded all those automatically. So getting back to this case, both process form is going to use that questions array in generating the questions. I mean, form.php is going to use that include file to generate the questions. Process.php is going to use that include file to do the grading. All right, let's start out just by looking at that, how that's created. So let's look at the form, which I believe is index. All right, I include my questions include file at the beginning. I have some styles for right or wrong. Those are not used initially, but we can, if depending on how much time we have, I'll either show you how we could use these styles, or it'll be your job to sort of figure it out. You know, they'll be considered like an exercise to do. Here's the stuff relating to AJAX and so on. Let's look at actually how the display form works. Display form is the function down here. I create a global variable first. A global variable simply means that it is available outside of the function. All right. I'm not sure why I did it in this case, but I did. All right. So I'm going to loop through the array named add and one. That's this array. So for each element in add in one, I'm producing this. So for question 0, for question 1, for question 2, 3, 4, and all that down the line, I am outputting the following tags. First of all, I'm printing the question. I'm taking an element of the array 1, the element from array 2, and just displaying add in 1 plus add in 2 equals. We use the magic quotes here. All right. If you're referring to an array element using the magic quotes, you have to use the curly braces. Otherwise, it's going to think this is one variable and this is another variable. It'll get confused. So we want to group it together and say this is the whole variable that we want to evaluate. So we put that within the curly braces. So anytime you're dealing with arrays, use the square brackets. Oh, I'm sorry, the curly brackets. What am I outputting? I'm outputting the name of the question. I guess I didn't use the label tag. Shame on me. I should have, but we'll ignore that for now. And I'm creating an input that's a text. And I'm creating the name of that text field and the answer being answer and the value of I. So what's the value of I? The value of I is 0 for the first element. It is 1 for the second element, and so on down the line. So if I have 10 questions, it's going to be 0 through 9. So I'm actually making the name and ID a variable. The first part of the variable is, hard-coded as the word answer. The last part is a number. So let's view the source to see what we get here. We get this. Our question, input type equals text, answer equals, our name of this is answer 0, ID is answer 0. Here's the question. Input, name is text, and or the type is text, the name is answer 1, the ID is answer 1. So we have one of these all the way through the end of the last question. So this code very nicely generates a form that looks like this. The question is worded, and we create the input box with a number attached to it so that we can differentiate between those. Notice what I also did. I put a hook in there. If I wanted to put an X or a check mark, I created for each thing a span that contains whether the question is right or wrong. And we can use that. And again, if we have time today, we will use that in this example. If not, try to see how you could change this so it shows whether each question was correct or not. All right, let's see the AJAX part of it. We create our request object, okay? Business as usual. Grade quiz. Here I cheated a little bit, all right? And I hard-coded the number of questions as 11. All right. Do a little bit of a sigh here. I hate to cheat, all right? Believe it or not, I actually could. Oh, wait a minute. Let's look at the PHP code. We're looking at the wrong thing. Maybe I didn't cheat. I didn't. Yay. I actually used PHP to print out the size of the array. All right. So that's how I know that the number of questions are 11. Yeah, that makes sense because I didn't go in and change that. All right. Yay. This is kind of next level stuff where we're using the PHP not just to create HTML, but we're actually using PHP to modify our JavaScript code because we want that questions variable to equal the number of questions there are in that array. Well, what this will do is this will go out to PHP and find the number of questions in that array when it's creating this page, and we'll put that right here, smack dab after the word questions. We then have our URL. The start of the URL is grade.php. We loop through for as many questions as there are, and we add to the URL answer plus the value of I equals document.getElementById answer plus I. That's a lot of stuff. All right, let's break this down. The URL is whatever the URL was before. The first time is going to be grade.php question mark. Each subsequent time is going to be that plus whatever we've added onto it. What are we adding onto it? The word answer, followed by the number, the value of this number, followed by an equal sign, followed by the value from that form control that corresponds to answer sub 1 or 0 or whatever. Answer sub 0 the first time through. And then if this isn't the last question, add an ampersand to the end. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put in here a console.log. And we're going to see how the URL gets formed. Maybe that'll help show you exactly what's going on here. All right. I got one right, even though I was just hitting button mashing on the keyboard. Let's see what the log shows, though. Notice how that URL is building. The first time through is grade.php question mark answer 0 equals 4. What is answer 0? That's the name of this text box and the ID of the text box. What is 4? It's the value of the text box. And we accumulate that going down the line until we finally have grade.php question mark answer 0 equals this, answer 1 equals this, answer 2 equals this, and so on. Because each time through the loop, we're adding the word answer, followed by the number, an equal sign, and the value that we get from the text box. Why does this work? It works because the text boxes are named answer 0 through 1 minus, or the number of questions minus 1. So we build that URL up. And if you look, it's our Word document. That's exactly what we wanted to create, except this is actually called grade.php. And the numbering starts as 0, not 1. Should have known that. So we form the URL exactly the way we need to form it. All right. Let's look at now the PHP of what grades it. We call get URL. So we're making our AJAX call. We're saying that when the status changes, call handle response, and then we make our request. So notice that this is not a full HTML page, full PHP page that includes HTML. All it's going to have is a Y and an N, or Y or an N, depending on the question is right or not. So let's see what it does. We've included those arrays. We loop through for as many elements are in the array. That should look familiar by now. We grab the answer from the query string using the magic quotes. The first time through, I is going to be 0, so we're going to look for the field on the query string called answer 0. We calculate the correct answer by adding the corresponding numbers in those two arrays. And if the answer that the student gave is equal to the correct answer that we calculate, we're going to print a Y. Otherwise, we're going to print an N. If we're not all done, we're going to print a comma. So what is this going to produce? This is going to produce something that looks like this. Y, N, Y, Y, N, Y, Y. All right, let me make these arrays a little smaller again. We'll make 2-question array. And I'm going to hard code my call to the server. Answer 0 equals 6, ampersand answer 1 equals 12. Oh. Put in grade.php. All right, what does it return? It returns 2 Ys. Why? Because I got those 2 questions right. If I put in another answer for this one, got to get the name right, I get a Y and an N. So that's the answer that I'm getting back from the server. I'm getting back a string. And where does this get put? This gets put in the response text. All right. So when that function gets called on the client, the response text is going to have a value of Y comma Y, or N comma N, or Y comma N, or N comma Y. All right. Now, let's see how we deal with it. First thing we do is this data that looks like this is called delimited data. Think of delimited as meaning separated by. So this is comma delimited data, which means that the data, each data item is separated from the others by a comma. All right. So we have y, comma n, comma y, comma y. All right. That's one string. We have to break that apart into an array so that we can process it, because it would be very difficult for us to directly process that string. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to parse this, and parse it simply means looking at it and separating it into its pieces. And I can do that by saying split, comma. What this will do is this will take everything and create an array, ignoring the commas and using the commas as a separator between the data. So if that's our string, we're going to get an array that has these elements in it. We're going to loop through that array. We set questions to 0, correct to 0. We loop through that array. And if the question is, if the answer is correct, that is the value of that array element is y, we add 1 to the correct field. If not, we don't add anything to the correct field. When we're all done with that loop, we calculate the percentage as being the correct divided by the number of questions, and then write that answer to the place on the page that's called percentage. This is a lot to get your head around, all right? So I encourage you to go and study this some on your own. Are there any questions right now about what I'm doing in this? Okay, so right now all I'm showing is a percentage, but I wouldn't have to just show the percentage. I could show if every question was right or wrong. All right. How do I do that? Well, each thing has a span called answer error number. So if the question is correct, in addition to incrementing the correct answers by 1, I could find the little error span for this question, which is simply the word hard-coded answer error, plus the value of I. And we can set that in our HTML equal to correct. They got it wrong. We set the value of that to incorrect. This is what I meant about by returning back all the individual answers, you have the flexibility of how to display this. And you can easily change without changing much in the server side, how the server side processes. You can easily change what gets displayed from the user. Remember, there's always a difference, and this is one of them like big computing concepts that is important to sort of understand. There can be a big difference between what the data actually is and how you choose to show it. All right. So in this case, the data is a series of Y's or N's, depending on whether they got the question right or not. I could show that as a percentage. I could also show that as a series of correct and incorrect in the span alongside of that. So let's go and save this. And now it shows correct or incorrect. All right. What else could we do? We had a style, if you remember. We had a style for right and a style for wrong. All right. I could change the style of the question, or rather change the style of the answer. I think I mentioned that, I don't know if we've done this in any previous examples, but as we move on in this course, we're studying more and new different things that you can do in JavaScript or PHP, and this is an example of that. So my two styles are right and wrong. I can set the class of that answer. Where is that? To right. Otherwise, I can set the style of the answer to wrong. And that didn't work. Let's see why it didn't work. How am I going to troubleshoot this? I'm going to go and look, see what my console says. Doesn't show me anything. Did I screw up on a name of something? No. All right. This is where we Google. When's the last time I changed a class name of something via JavaScript? I don't know. I don't remember. So JavaScript change class name. How can I change an elements class with JavaScript? I always see this and think like this is someone's homework, right? They probably have to do this and they just put it to Stack Overflow. And I think I already see the answer to this. That's not a good one. Class name. There's no style, it's just class name. Because strictly speaking, the class name is not part of the style. The class name helps determine the style, but all right, there we go. correct one, it shows in yellow. The incorrect one, it shows in red. Now, is this an accessible solution? I would argue yes, because I'm showing whether it's correct or not two different ways. I'm showing it's correct based on the color and the verbiage next to it. If it's incorrect or incorrect, I'm changing the color and putting the version, or changing the style and putting the verbiage in there. All right, what do I want you to get out of this assignment? The number one thing I want you to get out of the assignment is how one of the ways that we can have our server-side code return more than one piece of data. In the example we looked at last week, we looked at tuition, where tuition was just one number. So our server-side script returned just one number, return the tuition. All right. Now, that's all well and good for that case. It returns it in the variable response text. We can take it, we can output it. We could format it if we wanted to. We could put some decoration on it or whatever. In this case, our server-side script returns a string of data, a string of comma delimited data. All right. So this is how we do it, by writing either a Y or an N, followed by a comma. And we separate it on the client side by using the split command. That will give us an array that contains each element, so each Y and N. That's the main thing I want you to learn from this. The secondary things I want you to learn from this is how I wrote this to make my code more easy to modify. All right. A good challenge might be to write this code so that random questions are generated. We give the function a number of questions that we want, and it randomly generates the questions. That actually wouldn't be that hard, be a little tedious. Essentially what we're going to do, what we'd do is we'd make hidden fields on the form to contain the two numbers, so that would pass to the grade, the grade script would pass the two numbers that were being added along with the answer that the user got, and would loop through and add that up. So wouldn't really be that hard to do that. So that's why I hesitate to call this a perfect solution, because we could probably improve this a little bit more, because it'd be boring taking the same quiz over and over again. But if it generated random, and if you could pick how many questions it generated, then this would be a lot more flexible. But I did take steps to make the code more flexible. I looked at where the code is repeated, and I made changes to it. Now, delimited data is very good when the data that you're sending back is simple. All right. This data is simple. It's a Y or an N. All right. There's not nested fields and all kinds of other stuff. Y or an N. All right. What if we had more complicated data? What if we were doing a library search, for example? We were looking for books by title. And we would want to search for the books. We type in a title, and it returns me a list of books. Well, what kind of data would we have about books? Well, we'd have the book title, when it was published, where it was published, what the authors were. We might want to know all the authors on the book, and we might want to know information about each author on the book, when they were born, where they were born, when they died, and so on. All right. That's getting to be kind of complicated data. that's getting to be almost like what you'd have in a database assignment, where you have relationships between the data. One of these has n of these, and so on down the line. That is more complicated data. And you can do that with delimited data, but it's harder. All right. What we usually do with complicated data is we return data in either XML or JSON format. Let's look at an example of JSON data. JSON is a format that's used, and it's used outside of JavaScript, but that's where it gets its name, JavaScript object notation. All right, here's a message that shows, for example, information about a glossary. All right. These braces sort of indicate containment. So a glossary consists of everything between here and here. And what is in there? We have the title, colon, and the name of the glossary. The division is title, S, gloss list equals, and then we have a list of entries in the glossary, and we could have this repeated many times. An alternative way of doing this is with XML. XML is another format that can be used to exchange more complicated data. And this shows you an example of that. It's almost like HTML, except the tags are not the standard HTML tags. They're tags that you, as the creator of the data, actually make up. So you can create tags to show all kinds of things. Let's see if there's another example that we can find. This defines an object that has three properties. The name is John, the age is 30, and the person has no car. And it shows a little bit how we can parse this. We can say object.name and pull the name out of it. Object.age and pull the age out of that. Employee, name, salary. Are they married? Days of the week. Maybe this is an email list where we have the name of the person and their email address, and that's repeated several times. So this is what I mean by nesting. My object is a list of names, and each name itself is an object. At any rate, this is what we're going to be looking at next week. We're going to look at an example where we're going to return the data a couple different ways. We're going to return the data as delimited text, all right, just to reinforce that concept. We're going to return the data as JSON, and we're going to return the data as XML. And we'll see how to use it. Now, it'll be a simple example, so we're not really going to exploit the benefits of XML and JSON, but it'll be a way to demonstrate how to do those. Are there any questions about this? Yes. So as it relates to JSON, oh, you would, the server should be serving up data, not formatting of the data. Formatting should be done on the client. All right. So for example, if you call a script, you're asking, do you get back the finished HTML that you're just going to boom, pop right in there? Or are you just going to return the data? And the answer is return the data. that gives you much more flexibility in how you can change the client to format it differently without having to change the server code. Or you can have different clients calling the same server-side script and displaying the results differently. You know what I mean? So if you return the data, then it can be formatted any way you want. Again, the difference between the data and the way that you present the data. Keep that separation. Are there other questions? All right, that's all I had for today. We'll see you next week. Let me know if there's any questions you have concerning your labs.